Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 24 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. According to different sources, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, mainly according to pro-Russian sources, yesterday the Russians once again carried out a massive attack using hundreds of drones. And just during the day, several maps were published by pro-Russian sources and by pro-Ukrainian sources regarding the approximate routes of attacks. And this is one of the maps that was published during the previous 24 hours. As you can see, we have lots of yellow lines, which means that the Russians indeed were using hundreds of drones to attack mainly, as you can see, the northeastern parts of Ukraine, the northern parts of Ukraine, and the southwestern parts of Ukraine around the cities of Kryvyi Rog and Odessa. Another map was published, a bit by different source. Here we can see almost the same story, lots of drones flying over the northeast and the northern parts of Ukraine, and lots of drones in the southwestern parts in the area of the city of Odessa. But there is one important detail that I would like to point to attention, a very important detail. Once again, lots of sources stated that the Russians carried out a massive attack with massive distractions and so on, but when I finished analyzing the situation, I came to the conclusion that that wasn't a massive attack carried out by Russians. Yes, the Russians used hundreds of drones, but it seems that the Russians were doing something else and much more important than just attacking the territory of Ukraine with hundreds of drones. Let's discuss everything, of course, in details. And the most important thing I would like to point to attention, that's when talking about this map, we have explosions in the area of the city of Odessa, and the explosions were recorded during the night. We have explosions, lots of explosions in the area of Kharkiv. The Russians are changes tactics in this area. We will discuss this as well. And the Russians used hundreds of drones that were, according to this map, were just flying over the city of Kyiv without any purposes. So they were flying as if they were gathering some reconnaissance operation, but this is not like this. Maybe they were collecting some reconnaissance intelligence information, but that wasn't the main task of these drones. So they were flying over this area, and furthermore, almost the same picture we can see through this map that was published by another source. And as for this map, we see that there were several explosions around the city of Kyiv, but the Russian drones were doing the same. They were flying around the northern parts of Ukraine without any purposes. So as if they weren't tasked to attack something, to destroy something, as if they were tasked either to gather the surveillance information or as if they were tasked to do something else. I believe that they were tasked to do something else, and we will discuss this in a minute. So let's start. According to the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians used at least 2 waves of attack. Between 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. of the 2nd of May, the Russians used 227 drones, and between 8 and by the beginning of the 3rd of May of 2026, by 8 a.m., the Russians used additional 269 drones. So in total, altogether, as we can see, just during the previous 24 hours, the Russians used around 500 drones to attack or to do something over the territory of Ukraine. And probably they were doing something over the territory of Ukraine. So let's discuss everything, and it seems that this is a very interesting situation what the Russians are trying to develop right now with the purpose to establish complete superiority over the sky of Ukraine without any chances for the armed forces of Ukraine to change the situation and to turn everything back. To understand what was happening, we need to understand how exactly the Russian drones behaved during the night attacks. And these are the pictures of positions of Russian drones over the territory of Ukraine between, let's say, 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. of the 2nd of May of 2026. And as you can see, the Russian drones were just located over Ukraine. So we don't see any corridor. So this is the most important thing, because if you remember, these days the Russians began using new technologies, corridor mesh technologies. They create a corridor between, let's say, the central part of Ukraine and the border that allows the Russians to have a stable signal between drones through the entire corridor, which allows the Russians just to give targets and coordinates at the final point of attack, basically. But when talking about this particular case, we see that the Russians were just flying over the city of Kiev without any purposes. They were flying, and we see that every single hour, every single picture, we see less and less drones from the Russian side. So according to this picture, we can say that either the Russians were attacking the territory of Ukraine just with coordinates, and these coordinates were set probably on the territory of Russia, and the Russians launched the drones, and the Russians didn't care what exactly is going to happen next. So this probably the first thing. But once again, if we return back to the maps that we have just discussed, we see that that this information about Russian drones flying over the territory of Ukraine confirmed. And it seems that both this map and the pictures of different positions confirm that the Russians were flying just over the territory of Ukraine without any purposes. So what the Russians were doing? And later, after this, let's say, operation ended, the Russians launched another attack, the evening attack between 9 p.m. and let's say 12 a.m. And as for this attack, we can see a mesh corridor. So this is a mesh corridor. The drones are flying between the city of Kiev and the river of Dnipro and the Russian border. We can see this corridor. The Russians have stable connections through the entire wave of drones. We can see this, and this is a pattern. This is how exactly the Russians attack these days, and now the territory of Ukraine. With this technology, the drones received coordinates and they continued moving further in the direction of the city of Kiev. Lots of drones, but even as of this attack, we also haven't received lots of updates on the maps of explosions and so on. So it seems that the evening or overnight attack that was carried out by the Russians was tasked to protect the operation that the Russians carried out during the day. So the question is, what exactly the Russians were doing with these drones, and what were they testing, or what were they doing, and so on. And you know that during the previous 24 hours, we received very interesting updates, a very interesting update in the statement from the president of Ukraine, Zelensky. During the day, he stated that President Zelensky has complained about air activity from Belarus near the border. He stated there is a specific activity on the Belarusian side referring to helicopter flights. So according to information we have and according to media, during the massive attacks or during these massive actions from the Russian side in the northeastern parts of Ukraine, and anomaly activity or normal activity of the Belarusians was recorded right exactly in this area. The sources stated that either there was a helicopter that was flying, or a helicopter or two helicopters that were flying along the border between the Republic of Belarus and Ukraine itself, or it was something like air balloon or something like this. The most important thing is summarizing everything right now. That's the Russian drones were flying without any specific target in almost the same area where the Belarusian helicopters were flying, but on the Belarusian side of the border. We can make a conclusion probably that the Russians were trying to maintain or set up a specific connection between these drones that were flying in this area and helicopters that were flying over the territory of the Republic of Belarus. So we see that the Russians are trying to use airspace of the Republic of Belarus to communicate, probably just speculations, but it seems that this is exactly the way how the things been developing during the previous, since the beginning of the 2nd of May of 2026. So the Russians or the Belarusians were trying to maintain this territory with signals from the helicopters flying along the border or balloons that were flying in this area and the drones in this region of Ukraine. So which means that now the Russians have several approaches. They can use mesh drones that the Russians can use to control their Iran drones when they're entering the territory of Ukraine, and with the purpose to maintain a corridor, let's say, between the border of the Russian Federation and the river of Dnipro, like this, so they can control everything in this area. And it seems that when the Russian drones leave the territory of the river of Dnipro and the city of Kiev, the Russians want to be 100% sure that they can continue maintaining maintaining the flight of drones with helicopters. And if this is the case, if this is the situation, then of course the Russians will be able to coordinate, to monitor and to control drones flying over the city of Kiev further in the western direction with helicopters and with equipment along the border with the Republic of Belarus. And the thing that happened yesterday wasn't a massive attack carried out by Russians. When talking about the pictures and maps that we've discussed, it probably was the process when the Russians were maintaining their new approach and new technology that most likely in coming days and weeks the Russians are planning and going to use massively. So this is most likely the situation, and this is a very interesting situation, as you can see. Now let's discuss a few more important things regarding massive attacks and just attacks that the Russians carried out during the previous days. Once again, if you remember, on the 1st of May, there was an attack in the direction of the city of Ternopil. The Russians destroyed almost completely this plant, the Arion plant, and today we received a video from this area where we can see the consequences of attack. As you can see, the entire industrial zone was destroyed. And while the Russians, while the fire broke out from this area, we see more drones attacking this territory. So it seems that the Russians were tasked to destroy completely. And the sources are saying that the Ukrainians were using this industrial zone, this plant in the city of Ternopil, to produce drones that the Ukrainians were using probably, but most likely they won't be able to use them anymore to attack deep inside of the territory of the Russian Federation. Another important thing is the city of Kharkiv. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of very interesting updates from the city, and we had lots of updates on the same matter during the previous days from the most northern and the northeastern parts of Ukraine. And the thing is that the Russians intensified their attacks on Ukraine's gas stations through the city of Kharkiv. The sources reported that just during the previous 24 hours or 36 hours, at least 8 gas stations were destroyed by the Russians as a result of attack. Imagine yourself, 8 gas stations in the city of Kharkiv during war period of time means destruction of these gas stations means that the city, most likely in coming days, will start suffering huge problems with fuel. And of course, this is a very important situation from the Russian side, because right now the Russians are attacking the territory of the Kharkiv region in the area of the city of Volchansk. For example, in this video we can see another attack, another gas station destroyed. This is another gas station destroyed. So once again, 8 gas stations were destroyed, and obviously this is not the end. The Russians will continue attacking the city of Kharkiv, trying to make the situation when the city will be completely out of fuel, which obviously, according to the Russian logic, will allow them to intensify their offensive operation in the direction of both the city of Kharkiv and its northeastern part. The Sumy direction, we have since the beginning of April, more precisely, we also received lots of updates that the Russians during the previous days, during the previous months, destroyed several gas stations in Sumy. So we have lots of updates that the Russians, when talking about the northern, northeastern parts of Ukraine, the Russians are tasked to destroy as many as possible gas stations, which means that according to the Russian logic, this can lead to complete collapse of the logistics of Ukraine in this area, and which will most likely, according to the Russian logic, allow them to improve their positions along the line of combat contact. Another important thing that right before I started making this video, we received several reports that the Russians also attacked several gas stations on the territory of the city of Dnipro. So this is not a process along the border with Russia, but it is also a process through the entire territory of Ukraine. Now let's talk and let's discuss the Ukrainian attack. The sources stated that the Ukrainians also launched a massive attack deep inside of the territory of Russia, and this picture was published this morning, and according to information we have, the Ukrainians used 250 drones as of 11 p.m. of the 2nd of May of 2026. The Russians stated that during the previous 24 hours, they destroyed up to 500 drones that were launched by the Ukrainians between 2 and 8 p.m. of the 2nd of May. the Russians destroyed 146 drones, and overnight the Russians destroyed 334 drones of the armored forces of Ukraine. As of the moment when I started making this video, we haven't received anything on the matter of explosions, strikes, and so on from the Ukrainian side, which means that the Ukrainians maybe were trying to exhaust the Russian air defense forces and to just force them to use their missiles or air defense equipment. But there was a report which came to us from the city of Primorsk. This is the Leningrad region, and the Ukrainians, according to different media, attacked the Primorsk oil refinery and Primorsk port infrastructure. So this territory that Ukrainians have already attacked since the beginning of this year 2 or 3 times. And we have several videos. We have a fire anomaly map where we can see fire both on the territory of port infrastructure and on the territory of this terminal. Furthermore, we have a video made by locals, and here we can see a Ukrainian drone that was flying over the territory of Leningrad region in the direction of the city of Primorsk. And we have this video where we can see how Ukrainian boats, Navy drones, were attacking Russian tankers or commercial vessels in the area of the city of Primorsk. So, which means that when talking about particular this situation, it was a combination of 2 types of attacks, both of Navy drone attacks and air drone attack. So, and most likely these fire anomalies through the Baltic Sea around the port infrastructure probably confirms that most likely right exactly at these points the Ukrainians attacked this vessel. So this is probably the only update that we received regarding the Ukrainian massive attack, but most likely the Ukrainians will repeat their strikes in coming days, in coming hours, especially through the 9th of May of 2026, when the Russians celebrate a victory day. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the Sumy direction, where the Russians during the previous 48 hours, 36 hours managed to improve their positions significantly. So these are the changes on the ground between the dates. As you can see, the Russians, as a result of clashes, established complete control over the settlement by the name of Myropillya. So one of the biggest villages to the east of the city of Sumy was captured by Russians, and these are the changes on the ground. Once again, this information was confirmed by pro-Russian sources, by neutral mappers, and the Russians continue advancing. As you can see, according to these changes, the Russians reached this river of Psyol. Very difficult to say whether the Russians are planning to cross the river and to attack the settlement of Zaporizhzhia, but one thing is clear: the Russians will continue advancing further along the road with the purpose to attack the settlement of Mala Rybitsa, which is located to the south of Myropillya, and most likely the Russians may try to outflank the river of Psyol from the south and to continue offensive operation furthermore in the direction of Velika Rybitsa. So the southern Sumy front line continue collapsing. Ukrainians are not able to stabilize the situation, or haven't been able to done this so far, and the Russians, I would like to remind you, continue their offensive operation in the direction of Krasnopolya. The Russians are still very far from the city of Sumy itself from the east, but this is ongoing process. The Kharkiv direction, we believe that the Russians are going to intensify their offensive operation in this area, and as we discussed, just during the previous 36 hours, the Russians destroyed maybe even more than 8 gas stations. These are just the numbers we managed to collect through the night, and most likely they will continue this process. And this can lead to unpredictable consequences of the entire Ukraine's defense capabilities in the most northeastern part of the region, between the villages of Bely Kolodys and Veliki Burluk. In coming days, we expect additional changes on the ground in Russian favor. As for the previous 24 hours, just a video was published by the Group of Forces North, where we can see how Russians discovered a multiple launch rocket system of the armored forces of Ukraine that was later destroyed with FPV drones and so on. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Sloviansk direction. We have a very interesting update. During the previous several days, we received lots of updates about the situation in this area. Several sources stated that the Ukrainians carried out a counter-offensive operation in this area that allowed the Ukrainians to recapture positions between the villages of Sosnovo, Yarova, Drobisheva. So these are the changes on the ground between the 27th of April and the 28th of April. But a very interesting video was, by the way, these changes haven't been confirmed yet. We don't have any video proof, so that is why we keep this gray zone or infiltrated area. Another important video was published today, this morning, from the area of the settlement of Priship, and we used this video to adjust the map. So this is the video I'm talking about, and here we can see four Russian soldiers, at least four Russian soldiers that crossed the river of Seversky Donetsk and that answered the settlement of Priship, and then the Ukrainians began attacking positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in this village. So based on this video, we came to the conclusion that the Russians have access on the Ukrainian side of the river of Seversky Donetsk, and maybe the situation is much more complicated that you can see right now in front of your screens for the armed forces of Ukraine, and of course much more difficult one. So that is why we need to keep an eye on this area, because it seems that the Russians have crossed the river of Seversky Donetsk, and now the Russians are tasked to establish complete control over the villages of Priship, Tetianovka, Svetogorsk, Sosnovo for this area with this dense network of the fortifications. And if, of course, this is the truth, then we can say that the battle for Sloviansk has already begun, at least from the northern direction. Another important area report is that several pro-Ukrainian sources stated that the Ukrainians carried out a counter-offensive operation or reconnaissance operation between the villages of Bruskovka, Dibrova, and the roads TO514 or TO513. As of now, we don't have proofs, but maybe in coming days we'll receive additional changes on the ground in this area as well. The Kostiantynivka direction, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians once again managed to improve their positions, at least through the eastern flank, and these are the changes on the ground between the previous several days. So this is the map, and as you can see, the Russians continue their offensive. Almost every single day we adjust the map in the Russian favor, and the Russians are not going to stop. So this is the beginning of the 3rd of May. The Russians improve their positions along the Shekina Street, and the Russians continue improving their positions deep inside of the central part of the city. The adjustments along the Shekina Street were made based on the video that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in this area. Furthermore, we have reports that first sabotage and reconnaissance groups of the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to get water reservoirs and lakes to the north of Dobropillia, which means that this territory is no longer available for Ukrainians for rotation, for evacuation, for supply and support. So the Ukrainians most likely had possibilities to bring their forces in the area of Dobropillia using these roads for supply, but from now on they are not able to use this, which means that the battle for Dobropillia is also approaching its final part. The situation in the Dobropillia direction, small changes on the ground were recorded. As you can see, the Russians continue improving their positions around the settlement of Grishina, forcing the Ukrainians to fall back. And all these updates are telling us that the Russians are going to attack the settlement of Sergeyevka in coming weeks. Not in coming days, but in coming weeks we'll see the battle for the village. And based on the villages of Sergeyevka and Grishina, the Russians will continue offensive operation most likely in the northwestern direction and of course in the western direction, trying to outflank the settlements of Mizhova, Kolona Mizhova, Novopodgorodnya from the north, and to improve positions through the Dnipropetrovsk direction. As for the Zaporizhzhia direction, we have lots of updates from this area. There are very heavy clashes still for the northern direction. We have updates on from different sources about changes on the ground. These are the changes, for example, between the dates. There are very heavy clashes. Both the Russians and the Ukrainians are trying to attack each other through these fields. and it seems that currently nobody controls the initiative, and currently the clashes are taking place for small positions with the purpose from the Ukrainian side to slow down the Russians and from the Russian side to improve their positions. Unexpected updates were received from the area of the river of Volcha. I would like to remind you that these days, or since the beginning of April, or maybe since the beginning of the second half of April, we received a report that the Russians crossed the river of Volcha and the Russians began battle for the settlement of Lisne, and we've been waiting for confirmation of this situation these days, but we haven't received anything. But instead of confirmation, we received updates that the Ukrainians managed to counterattack and to improve their positions significantly between the villages of Sichneva, Voskresenska and Alexandragrad. So a very weird and strange and first of all unexpected situation is taking place right now in this area. Of course, we are waiting for additional proofs to make 100% conclusions. The western Zaporizhzhia direction, we have adjusted the map significantly, as you can see. This is the end of the 2nd of May. This is the beginning of the 3rd of May. We received the video that confirmed that the Ukrainians have positions in the central part or even in the southern part of Primorska and through the western part of the city of Stepnogorsk. In this video, we can see how Russians were attacking positions of the armed forces of Ukraine in this area. So based on this video, we came to the conclusion that the Ukrainian counter-offensive operation is gaining momentum through the western Zaporizhzhia direction, and it seems that Ukrainians are tasked, no matter what, no matter the price, to recapture the settlement of Stepnogorsk and to force the Russians to fall back to the south of the water barrier that goes through the southern parts of the settlement. Ukrainians in coming days will intensify their offensive operation, and with these counterattacks, the Ukrainians are tasked to ruin the Russian plans regarding the major offensive in the direction of the city of Zaporizhzhia. We have covered most of the updates regarding the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. Just a few words about the conflict in the Middle East and in the Western Africa. According to information we have, the Iranians provided a 14th plan to the United States of America regarding the settlement of the conflict. Iran has responded to the US proposal with its own 14-point proposal. The United States proposed a 2-month ceasefire to work out the details, but Iran rejected it. Iran's demands include ensuring no aggression, withdrawal of American military forces from the perimeter of Iran, lifting the Navy blockade, unfreezing Iran's frozen assets, paying compensation to Iran, lifting sanctions, ending the war on all fronts, including Lebanon, establishing a new mechanism for the Strait of Hormuz. So these are demands of the Iranian side, but it seems that the United States of America will reject them. And we had a report, a statement made by the President of the United States of America. He said that I will soon be reviewing the plan that Iran has just sent to us, but can't imagine that it would be acceptable in that they have not yet paid a big enough price for what they have done to humanity and the world over the last 47 years. So according to these statements, the plan would be rejected. Meanwhile, the President of the United States of America states continue to withdraw far more than 5,000 troops from Germany. Most likely, these forces would be redeployed in the area of the Middle East. Furthermore, we have reports that the United States of America is exploring multiple scenarios for leadership transition in Cuba. So as of timings, the United States of America has less and less time to carry out this operation because midterm elections are going to start very, very soon. And at the same time, we see that the United States of America still hasn't finished the situation around Iran. There is a Navy blockade, but we continue receiving updates of how thousands of trucks from Pakistan moves oil and probably fuel from Iran in the direction of this state. We receive lots of videos these days about the situation. Here we saw just thousands of cars, and here we can see thousands of motorcycles. This video was published several days ago. This is the video. Thousands of motorcycles in the same area transferring oil and fuel from the state of Iran in the direction of Pakistan. Of course, this situation won't replace oil export of Iran, but obviously this is also another way how the Iranian side can continue earning money on this situation. And another important thing is the current conflict between China and the United States of America. China does not recognize US sanctions on Iranian oil purchases and will not comply with them. Beijing has issued an injunction to block illegal US sanctions on Chinese refineries processing Iranian oil. So this is a very important situation. We see the next round or the new round of sanction wars between China and the United States of America. But another important thing is that today China and several Asian countries signed an agreement to make payments without using and or involving dollar in this system. So which means that China is becoming more and more independent in their payments, in sanctions, and so on. As for the conflict on the territory of Mali, today we received final confirmations that the pro-Russian sources and government forces left the northern and the northeastern parts of the state. The settlement of Tsasali was completely handed over to the separatist forces. The Russians and pro-Russian sources are trying to stabilize the situation along the border and along main supply lines. There are still very heavy clashes, and according to sources we have, the situation is quite difficult. And that's it for today, for the short video. The Military with Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye-bye.